At the very least, you should be able to hover over any individual box and hit the mute
Okay.
button
Okay.
if you can find a mute all.
Yeah, I see it.
This meeting will come to order. This special meeting was called by the Finance Committee, which consists of Chairperson Edward Lewis and members Councilwoman Megan Starrett and Councilman Mike Craig for the purpose to discuss and possibly pass resolution number 10, 2020. Roll call.
Creamer,
Present.
Gregg,
Present.
Halter,
Here.
Kern Kane,
Here.
Lewis,
Present.
Littman,
Here.
Lombardi,
Here.
Starrett,
Here.
and Barrett.
Here.
Roll call of 9 present. I will call off the list of the city officials if it's okay with you, Madam President.
That would be wonderful, Diane. Thank you.
You're welcome. Mayor Catanzaro Perry. Safety Service Director Barb Sylvester.
Present.
Jane Ferraro.
I'm here.
Debbie Bonk. Law Director Justin Richard.
I'm here.
Chief Counsel Bill Bartos.
Present.
Engineer David Kroc. Jason Popeil. Community Development Director Samantha Walters. Economic Development Director Dave Maley. Chief Lozier. Chief Burgasser. Income Tax Lori Katagides Boron.
Here.
Terry Argent. Hey, that does it.
Thank you, Diane.
Yes,
Dave Maley.
you are here? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Diane, this is Debbie Bonk.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Sorry I couldn't answer your call, Debbie.
That's okay, I figured it out.
Okay,
Took a while.
okay.
Before we move to the resolution, we'll have remarks of delegations and citizens to matters on the agenda pertaining to resolution number 10, 2020. Please state your name, address, and please limit your comments to 2 minutes. Is anyone else hearing a bird?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
If you're responsible for it, could you please mute it? Thank you. Hearing none, we'll move into resolution number 10, 2020.
A resolution to approve the requirements of the Ohio Senate Bill 310 in order to receive and expend federal funds under Section 5001 of the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security CARES Act and declaring an emergency.
Councilman Lewis.
Yes, there's a couple of things I would like to state about this particular resolution. One, This resolution is the money that we are receiving from the state of Ohio as it travels through the county auditor. And these funds are to be used to essentially reimburse or offset the cost that the city has incurred with COVID-related expenses. There's a laundry list of things that we can use them for. And this is due to us obviously not being able to budget for these items because there was no way to anticipate such a development in our community. Also, I'd like to share with council that over the past week and a half or so, maybe 2 weeks, we have received some promising information. I was hoping that we would have something tonight to actually put in front of council, but the information has not completely trickled out from the state. But it looks like some of these funds could potentially be utilized in the form of grants for businesses within our community. So I know that's one thing we've spoken about with CDBG and other proposals, and talking about if we need to expand or if we need a safety net. It looks like these funds will be able to serve that purpose. The only issue we have not had, and I've been in contact with the county auditor, we've communicated with the state, I've communicated with the mayor and our city auditor, and we have not received the definitive parameters as to what may or may not qualify, and exactly what the amounts could be. So even though I was hoping to be able to rush and get something in front of us tonight, it seemed a little premature. So I hope that within 2 weeks' time, we can have something. So that's just something for everybody to keep their eye on. With that said, the current form of the resolution that's in front of us does need amended. We should have all received the amended version Friday, the 26th. I guess, is everyone in receipt of that and ready to proceed? I would
Yes.
say that there are. Yes.
Hey, Ed, this is Jane Ferrero. I just wanted, can you hear me?
Well, Madam President, can the auditor speak?
Yes, that's fine, Jane, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. We did, Council, Madam President, we did get verification of how much money we are going to get as soon as this resolution passes. And it's $577,577.80. And so tomorrow, if you pass this resolution tonight, we'll send it over to the county and we will probably receive in that check before the end of the week.
Thank you.
Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you.
Has Lori communicated the exact number of qualifying expenses yet, or are we still waiting to see exact parameters and calculate that number?
Well, she has sent what we've got so far. We were still waiting for a few from the fire department, but it's not going to be, we're probably in that $100,000 range.
That's what, yeah, okay.
And that's just a guess. Yeah, that's a guesstimate right now. So, but there are other things that we, as these months go on, that we'll be able to use some of that money for.
Absolutely. Yeah, last communication I had, we were in that 100 to 120,000 range, and this does extend until the end of September. So there's future expenses that still could qualify, I believe.
That's correct.
Madam President, I would open it up to any more questions of council members before I make the amendment.
Are there any questions or discussion? Linda Littman?
Thank you, Madam President. I do want to just confirm, what is that finite date that we can have expenses up till? You had said Ed just said the end of September, but I thought I read it was through the end of the year with an initial interim point at mid-October. Can we confirm that,
correct.
please?
That's correct.
Okay, so
What you're saying, Mrs. Littman, that's correct.
okay, thank you. I just wanted to confirm that. So it's actually through the end of the year, but there's an interim point of mid-October.
That's correct.
Thank you, Jane.
Thank you.
Well, to that point, Jane, then, I believe you, but I want to make sure we get on board with Lisa, because I just spoke with her today or Lori, I'm sorry. And I believe she had mentioned end of September, and it caught me off guard, and I probably should have questioned her more, but I want to make sure we're all on the same page then,
Right.
if that's the case.
It's into October. We have to have it authorized by that time, and then we'll have to spend it before the end of December. But we can always, appropriate it for a certain thing, and then we have to use it by the end of December, or we have to give it back.
Yeah, this is Lori. I do apologize. I was aware of the October date. I may have communicated that I was worried about a spike maybe coming August or September, that we'd have to use some of those funds again. So I was aware that it was October 31st, and I apologize if that was a misunderstanding.
No, that's okay. So bottom line is, we do have to submit by the end of October, it sounds like, but it can be spent anytime through the end of the year. So we can do a little bit of projecting if necessary.
Yes, that's correct.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Lewis?
It looks like Ms. Littman has an additional question. You are muted, Linda.
Councilwoman Littman?
Thank you, Madam President. I apologize. I didn't know I was muted. I just wanted to make sure that if the parameters would open up to include the potential assistance to businesses for grants, would there be any way of receiving additional funds? Should we run into the spike situation that Lori just spoke of closer to the end of the year, or is this our figure and this is it?
I can't predict that. I can't even make a guess on that.
Does anyone?
I can just speak to from the communications I've had with people involved in this. At this time, this is the money that comes from, the Ohio Senate. I hear that there has been conversation about a second round, but I would agree with Jane that to speculate that it will be here would be maybe a little premature. But there are whispers that there could be a possibility of that.
Okay, thank you.
Whispers.
Anyone else with questions or concerns? Seeing none, Councilman Lewis?
Yes, with that said, I make an motion that we amend resolution number 10-2020 to be changed in its entirety to the new Exhibit A as distributed to City Council on June 26, 2020.
You don't want that.
Seconded by
Megan Sarah.
roll call for suspension.
Gregg,
Yes.
Halter,
Yes.
Kane,
Yes.
Lewis,
Yes.
Littman,
Yes,
Lombardi,
Yes.
Starrett,
Yes.
Barrett,
Yes.
and Creamer.
Yes.
9 yes to amend resolution number 10 to reflect the changes submitted.
Okay, I thought that was for suspension. Councilman Lewis?
All right, so now I make a motion that we suspend resolution number 10-2020, requiring 3 readings and bringing it forward for a vote.
Seconded by
Starrett.
roll call for suspension.
Halter,
Yes.
Kane,
Yes.
Lewis,
Yes.
Littman,
yes,
Lombardi,
Yes.
Starrett,
Yes.
Barrett,
Yes.
Creamer,
Yes.
and Gregg.
Yes.
9 yes for suspension.
And for passage.
Kane,
Yes.
Lewis,
Yes.
Whitman,
Yes.
Lombardi,
Yes.
Starrett,
Yes.
Barrett,
Yes.
Kramer,
Yes.
Gregg,
Yes.
and Halter.
Yes.
9 yes for passage.
Thank you, Madam Clerk, for keeping me on my toes about the amendment. And resolution number 10, 2020 has passed. Meeting adjourned.
Okay,
Please
gonna pause for a
please stay
minute
on,
here.
though. Yeah, don't get off. Stay on the call.
Madam President,
Yes, Diane.
how early will you be available for me to come and have you sign this?
Whatever works for you, 8, 8:15, 8:30, 7
Okay.
a.m.
And then I will take it directly to the mayor,
All
and
right,
then we'll give it a certified copy to the auditor.
so about 8:15?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you.
Okay. I'm ready, Ed.
All right, now we will begin our work session. We do have a lot of visitors tonight, and we do appreciate that community participation in our meeting. And for that reason, I will just give a short dialogue as to the function of tonight's meeting and how we're moving forward. I know that there is one particular issue that is garnering a lot of interest, and that's great, again, to see that interest from our community. Tonight is a work session, so what that means is that the different committees of City Council will be moving along. We will go through each committee to see if they have business to discuss tonight or not. I will call out the committee and they will say yes or no to whether or not they have business, and then they will discuss or not discuss said business. There will be no votes tonight. There will be no final decisions tonight. Everything is up for discussion. You may hear us say we provide our verbals. And what we are saying when we say we are providing our verbals, we are telling our clerk that we are verbally agreeing to allowing any particular request of legislation to go on the agenda for the next meeting, which will be a week from today. And all those that we are giving verbal to would then be up for first reading. Any legislation that is in front of council could receive up to 3 readings, could be tabled. Could a lot of things happen once it gets there, but typically it's a 3-reading process. I just want to make sure everybody's up to speed on that. Every meeting in which we have a reading of any particular ordinance, there are opportunities at the beginning of the meeting to speak. And at the end of the work session, we typically also allow an opportunity for community speaks as well. So if you hear something tonight during the conversation that you disagree with, or you want to have your thoughts or feelings heard on, there will be an opportunity at the end of this meeting for you to be able to do so. I don't want you to think that we're ignoring or avoiding or anything of that nature. We just have to work through this process, but we will have an opportunity for everyone to speak. And with that said, we will go ahead and move on. I am getting a call from the council, so I'm going to pause for one moment. Sorry about that, council members. That was the council clerk. Apparently we had a power surge down there and she cannot hear us or see us. But she is still logged in and it says it's still recording. So I think we should probably proceed. I have her on my speakerphone so that she can hear us speak. So we might have to play a little bit of communication. I might have to communicate any requests that you have of council to you guys, if that's okay. With that said, community development.
Thank you, Ms. Lewis. Before we get into the new piece tonight, I just want to touch base. We have one old piece tonight. That's ordinance number 60, 2020. You're giving us a lot of feedback with the speakerphone.
A lot.
Maybe that's better. It might not be you. I don't know. I'm getting a lot of feedback. I don't know if anybody else is.
Yeah.
Well, anyways, we have ordinance number 60, 2020. And as you spoke earlier, the I don't know why I have so much feedback. Is that making everybody else crazy?
Can we remind everybody that's on the phones to please mute their phones? That'll get rid of that feedback.
Thank you, Mr. Lombardi. With ordinance number 60, 2020, Mr. Lewis did just touch on resolution 10, that we may be able to use a significant portion of that COVID funding that we're getting possibly towards some grant money. So I think we need to flush that out and see what kind of funding we can use with that resolution money that we're getting, and see if we could maybe combine this idea of this ordinance with the grant money that we're receiving from the state under under resolution 10, and see if we can use that money towards grants, and that would fill any gaps that we have. I think we need to flush everything out with that new information that we can use that money towards for grants for some of our businesses, and then see where we would land with this ordinance number 60. Any questions or concerns at this point? I think we just need to kind of hit the brakes and get some more information on that COVID money we're receiving under ordinance 10. And then hopefully we can have a clearer picture here in the near future. Any other comments on ordinance number 60, 2020? Okay. Obviously, we have a significant number of callers on tonight for the new legislation request I have before me in community development. And that is the new Planning Commission's recommendation for rezoning the area located at approximately 1900 Wells Road Northeast from one family residential district to the general business district. We do have Mr. Maley on the phone tonight. We have Craig Sanders available as well tonight, that I would like to have him address City Council a little bit and kind of tell City Council about the plan. I think he's reached out and spoken to many City Council members already, but just so we can field some questions. And I will be asking Mr. Bartos to speak as well on the restrictive covenant that everybody has received in the packet as well. So Dave, do you want to start? Do you have any questions or comments, or should I just hand it over to Craig and see if he wants to just give us a little overview?
Right.
Well, not hearing from Dave.
This is
Yes.
This is Ted Hernkane. May I interject for a brief moment before you get started?
Yes, sir.
I would just like to let the record reflect that I abstained from discussing, voting on, or taking any other action in this matter.
Thank you, Mr. Hernkane.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Sanders, I do see that you guys are on, and I just want to know, would you guys like to address City Council and kind of give us an overview of your plan, what you would like to do, why you want us to rezone this into a business district, and just be available for any questions from City Council members?
Absolutely. Can you hear us?
Yes, we can. Go right ahead.
Great. Hello, Madam President Isnick, Honorable Mayor Kathy, all ward representatives, and whoever else may be on the call. I started with the Planning Commission meeting with a quote from Winston Churchill that talked about, or that said, during challenging times, don't confuse leadership with popularity. And this is a challenging decision. During these challenging times, though, Progressive Auto Group is looking to expand in Massillon. The Sanders family has been working hard to find solutions to an ongoing problem that many people in the area struggle to solve. For years, residents and the church have been at odds with one another on how to sell the property and maintain the integrity of the community. For months, since December 2019 and prior to that even, I have worked with residents, the church, engineers, lawyers, and excavators to develop a plan that addresses the concerns. Number one, no public entrance to the property from Wales Road. This keeps traffic at the same level that it's at today. Number two, all access to the property will be through the existing Progressive Chevrolet sales. Progressive would adjust our existing parking area to build a drive to get up to the church property. Number three, we would have a 30-foot wide and 3-foot high, up to a 6-foot dedicated mound that would drop up to 6 feet on the back side, which would be recorded with the county. That would have a 16-foot setback, so a total of 46 feet would be dedicated green space. There are light poles on the existing church property that are approximately 32 feet tall. Those would come down and we would replace them with poles that are about 15 feet lower than the existing poles. There's water runoff, or there's water issues for people who live behind the church property. I've met with them. They're excited about this plan that would manage the water runoff on the existing site. Problems that have existed since the late 60s or early 70s. The residents would benefit from the reduction of road noise from basically 2 sets of mounds along with trees and other vegetation on top. And it would provide a park-like setting that would be permanently important to the county and improve the overall look and feel of the area to make that area of Massillon better. We do have slides. Many of you, like you said, have received these detailed drawings. Many of you have had a chance to review those, and there has been several drafts of the restrictive covenants that I do believe Mr. Bartos has agreed with our attorney satisfies the need of the neighborhood and the city to protect the neighborhood and the residents for future not sure exactly what to say, just for the future. That's all I have to say, but I am open for questions.
Now, Mr. Sanders, is it correct that you have spoken with the neighbors and the individuals in the neighborhoods around this proposal numerous occasions and really tried to implement some of the plans that they have and suggestions that they have made for you? Is that correct?
Well, it would be unfair to say that I've met with everyone, but I have met with quite a few people, and there was a lot of input from neighborhood meetings, from what I understand, with people that I was meeting with, to put the details of the plan in place to satisfy concerns. But it would be unfair for me to say that I met with everyone.
City council members, excuse me? City council members, I would ask that you have any questions, please direct them toward Mr. Sanders at this time. Do you have any specific questions for him? Okay, I'm not seeing any at this point. Mr. Bartos, everybody has had a chance to read, hopefully, the restrictive covenant that was sent along in the packet that we got. Mr. Bartos, if you could just kind of explain that to members and give us your opinion on that. I know there has been some back and forth with Mr. Sanders and his legal team about that. Mr. Bartos?
I was trying to get on it.
And Ed, just for the record, I am back in, so you can take me off speaker.
Mr. Bartos, are you on the call still? Okay, it looks like we have lost him at this point. So hopefully he can join the call at some point and explain that restrictive covenant to us. For all those that are on the call that are interested in what City Council will be doing with this ordinance, I will say this is obviously going to go at least 3 readings. It possibly could go even longer. We have to have a public hearing on this, which will probably have to be held via teleconference as we
Megan?
have been doing. Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, I cannot hear you. You are breaking up. So I've not heard anything you've just said.
I think there's just a lot of feedback because we have a lot of people, Linda.
Okay, all right.
I'm not sure how to make it better.
I just wanted to know,
Honestly,
is Bill Bartos going to be able to comment on the restricted covenants?
he was on the call, it looked like originally, but I don't think he has answered us at this time, so I'm not sure where he is. So we
Oh,
may
okay.
have to just hold off on that until the next work session or the next meeting. He was on the call. Diane, if you're back on the call, is Mr. Bartos still there?
He is still here. I just checked with Justin. Let me go check with Bill.
Okay.
He is showing on the call and not muted.
Councilwoman Starrett?
Hello there, Mr. Bartos.
Yes, I don't know what happened there. I was talking into the phone and was informed I wasn't on, so.
Oh yeah, we did not hear you. Sorry about that.
No problem. I was looking at you guys and talking into the phone, but apparently you couldn't hear me. So if you'd like me to continue.
I'd like you to start from the top because I don't think anybody heard you.
Yes. Okay, great. Well, so just to clarify a few points, with the restrictive covenants or the declaration of restrictive covenants, there was a draft that all of you should have received with your packet that was sent back to me and the city from legal counsel for Progressive. I did not have a chance to, officially weigh in on this with their legal counsel. So I have not approved or, officially reviewed this. And, to the extent that I would be reviewing this, I'd be reviewing this for the city. I wouldn't be reviewing this for the residents or the neighbors. So this would be, I represent the city and I'd be reviewing it as such. So just to clarify a few points that were made by Mr. Sanders. So, but with the declaration, it does seek to memorialize some of the points that he made about future use of the property and to bind that use into the future. With restrictive covenants, though, of course, there always comes the question of, first you have to keep in mind that any restrictions on the future use of property are always looked at unfavorably by courts in the state of Ohio, and they're read strictly. So they're always given a strict interpretation. So that's one thing to keep in mind. And there's always the question of, to whose benefits or to whom's benefit are the restrictions running to, if you will. And so that is why it was suggested that the city should not only be the beneficiary listed, but also the neighbors or the neighboring properties should be listed as well. Keep in mind that with the restrictive covenant, when it comes to a violation, if you will, if Progressive or a future owner were to not, honor the terms of the covenant, it wouldn't be like a traditional, zoning violation or a building code violation where we could go out and cite them and, go through that process. This would require a court action, in, common pleas court, seeking an injunctive relief most likely. And so it's a different process. We would not have the same process here. And so, we would, have to keep our, code enforcement or zoning, enforcement, apprised of the fact that this property has a slightly different bend to it and that there's this, restrictive covenant that exists, and to make sure that we're aware of, any violations of these terms. Also, if the restrictions aren't adhered to and those who benefit from them do not enforce them, there's always the possibility of them being considered abandoned or waived. So, it runs to the city. Future city officials could decide, well, we're just not going to enforce these. Now, adding the neighbors does help that, but at the same time, people could forget. Things could just get lost in as time goes on, and then it could be forever considered waived or abandoned. So that's another thing to keep in mind, that it doesn't necessarily last forever. Now, I'm not saying that that's a likely scenario, but I just wanted to bring that to your attention. So there are a few other items that I did want to suggest or bring up to legal counsel for Progressive that I will be discussing with him. Just some minor linguistic thoughts, but the points that I raised with you will still remain, whether or not we take care of the minor language errors. I'm just giving you the facts of what will be there, whether we have this agreement or not. So I'm trying to do the best that I can to finalize language that will be as strong as it can be, but we'll still have that issue of, we're going to have to go to court for injunctions. There's no, citation for this. And there's always that possibility of, it could be considered abandoned and lost forever. And then also we have the issue of the fact that technically Progressive, or the LLC that would be purchasing this property, does not own this property yet. And so I'm not sure how the Planning Commission couched their approval or their recommendation, but we will have to decide and craft some sort of, the ordinance that would be, if approval is the route that council ultimately decides to go, we would have to see how we would craft that approval, given the fact that they don't, currently own the property, and so, they can't enter into this document yet. And so it would have to be, a forward-looking approval, almost like, if, provided that within 90 days this is entered into, or something. It's hard to imagine right now, because once that approval is given, the idea of trying to bind, a future owner of the property to do something, could be difficult, and then having to unwind the zoning process may be difficult as well. So some thoughts there. I know I spoke a lot, and hopefully all that came through.
So just for clarification purposes, your concern is that the ordinance, if it were to be passed by city council, would have to be passed in a way of the property is rezoned upon the purchase of the property by Progressive's LLC? Kind of like it's only going to be rezoned if they purchase the property because of this restrictive covenant? Is that kind of what you're saying?
Well, it would have to be that, and I mean, provided that this is the route. Once again, it's council's prerogative. But if council decides that to provide that the approval would be contingent upon execution of a document like the restrictive covenant that the law department received through the administration, then yes, there would have to be some sort of contingent language in that ordinance, basically a purchase and execution of the restrictive covenant. We would have to determine the best language to include in the ordinance to bind that, but that would be a consideration that we have to keep in mind.
So council members, that's something we're going to have a conversation about. If council feels that we feel strongly about the restrictive covenant and making sure that it is involved in the ordinance. And basically it comes down to, do we blanket approve the rezoning, or do we approve the rezoning based on Progressive purchasing and the restrictive covenant, or not approve at all? I guess it's just, we have to see which way we're looking at before we draft this ordinance, if we like the restrictive covenant or not. I think that's appropriate. So how do council members feel about that?
Mr.
Mr. Lewis.
I think Mr. Bartos is squarely on one of the key factors here, regardless of the merits of whether or not you're in favor of the plan that has been presented for the property, or if you are opposed to that plan and more in favor of continuing with what is currently there. End of the day, for me, that's not even the way I want to say it. At the end of the day, we have a proposed plan for that property, but the people that are making that proposal do not own that property. So the minute, if this council were to choose to change that to commercial, if the deal between Progressive and the church were to fall through, the church would now own commercial property that they could sell to anyone. And there would be no covenants, there would be no, and I think that's the concern of a lot of the citizens. So for me to even really be able to consider this solidly, there would have to be something in there that would show and requires that not only does the property have to be renovated the way it's being sold to us as, but there has to be a guarantee that the property is to be sold to Progressive and that the church couldn't end up going to another bidder. And I'd like to believe that everybody is trustworthy. And I like to believe that people are good for their word. So this is not an indication of not trusting anyone involved in this, but I'm also a realist and understand that in business things happen. So without those guarantees, it makes this very difficult to consider. Obviously, if Progressive already owned the property, then we'd be having a slightly different conversation, but that's not the case. So I want to see more of what Mr. Bartos was referencing, I guess.
Well, yeah, that's where Mr. Bartos kind of explained that I think he would like to work with Mr. Sanders and his legal team on some type of language that would be in this ordinance, that this ordinance would, if voted and passed, would only take effect if, I guess, if Progressive and the restrictive, if Progressive purchases and executes the restrictive covenant. I'm going to have to leave that in Mr. Bartos's hands to determine what kind of language that would be and how that would be worded. And if we can do that, we're basically, if the sale were to fall through or something like that, this ordinance would then not go forward. Does that make sense? Or this ordinance would die. The execution of the ordinance would die. Mr. Bartos, I'm assuming that's kind of what you're trying to say here, that you think it might be the best course of action to make sure that something like that language is within the ordinance before we go forward and even start considering the ordinance, to make sure we're not just rezoning the property for anybody else to take hold of in the long run.
Absolutely, yes. You said very succinctly what I took like 5 minutes to say. So yes, we'll need to do some research from the law department standpoint. We took some time to research restrictive covenants in general, and we'll want to take some time to research, contingent planning, zoning change approvals as well, and make sure that A, they're enforceable, and B, what's the best plan moving forward here for a approval of the kind that we're contemplating.
Now, obviously, I will ask any other council members for any further discussion, but at this point, I do think that I don't want to sign off on this yet. I want to just keep this pending as work session legislation until we can get that language from Mr. Bartos, because I don't want to give my verbal approval to make this into an ordinance that will go up for first reading next week when we don't even have the proper language yet from Mr. Bartos. So I'm not going to ask my committee members for any type of verbal approval tonight. I think we need to just keep working with the law department to make sure we have this specifically ironed out. We all know this is going to be a long process anyways, and I think we need to make sure we're dotting our I's and crossing our T's across the board before we start taking any action on this. Ms. Littman, I do see a question from you.
Thank you, Megan. I just have a question on the restrictive covenant document itself. Mr. Bartos was indicating that if there was any enforcement of this document, that it would require court action in common pleas court. Would the city have to be a party to that enforcement litigation, or can the property owners, the neighboring owners as listed here, could they, independent of the city, file suit in enforcement of this document?
Sure. Madam Chairwoman?
Go right ahead, Ms. Bartos.
Yes, so thank you. There is some case law out there that actually says that all interested parties need to be plaintiffs. So it would actually have to, the city would actually have to be a party, whether it be named by a resident who names the city as an interested party, as well as all other residents that fall into the class of residents covered by the language. But we would not, as the language that's added is drafted, it's drafted so that there are additional individuals who are benefited by this, because initially it was just the city, and so the entire onus was on the city to act, and it was only the city that could act, and and maybe that's the way that it's preferred by council, but the idea that the entire onus was on the city would be the only one that could act, and that that possibility in the future that maybe city officials don't enforce it, and that's why the expanded language was added to include the language about the residents and the residents within the locality.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Any other council members at this time?
Mr. Barrett, I just want to clarify for everyone in attendance then, if verbals are not given tonight, that means it will not be on the agenda next Monday. It will not be up for discussion next Monday. Council will do nothing with it for 2 weeks, and we will discuss it again in 2 weeks' time.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. That is correct. I would just ask Mr. Bartos to follow up with some of his concerns and start hammering out that language. I think that's the most appropriate way to look at this. If we do move forward on this and bring it to first, second, and third reading, that I think that within the ordinance that we are going to be considering, that language needs to be in there, that this ordinance would not take effect unless Progressive does purchase this piece of property and the restrictive covenant is then executed. So if Mr. Bartos, if you and the law department can continue that research and figuring out the proper language, or whether or not we can even make sure it is executed that way, and council members continue to review your packet, any questions or concerns, get to me or Mr. Bartos, and we can forward them on to Mr. Sanders if it's a question for him or whatever is needed. And then we will continue this conversation in 2 weeks. Any other questions or concerns?
No.
All right, seeing none, Mr. Sanders, thank you for your participation tonight. We will all be in touch with you. And I have nothing further in community development.
Thank you. Environmental.
Nothing from environmental.
Health and welfare.
Nothing for health and welfare.
Parks and rec.
I have nothing for Parks and Rec.
Police and fire.
Yes, Mr. Lewis, I did want to mention, we had been discussing animal control over the past few months, and there have been situations that have been brought to the committee as well as brought to council that were issues that needed to be addressed, and for whatever reason was not being taken care of properly. Now I think through some of our discussions, we have approved our city flyer, where it was a card that would give all of our department phone numbers, all of the organizations' phone numbers, et cetera, that if a resident would have a situation that they would need to they would be able to refer back to this city information card and be able to make the right call. Well, this past Saturday, there was a situation that occurred on Saturday morning where a resident had an animal that appeared to be ill, a canine that was not that was in their yard, not appearing to be acting properly. And so they did contact the Massillon police, and the police officer was dispatched. They did have conversation with the resident. They saw the canine was not acting right, that was potentially ill. So they went to the card, they looked at exactly where they should contact. They contacted the Humane Society. The Humane Society said absolutely they would be out. Now they did give between 25 and 30 minutes for response, but they did respond to the situation and they were able to take care of the situation for the resident successfully. So I guess I did want to report back that at least currently, it looks like on a temporary basis where we were looking at the information card, in this situation, it did work as we had envisioned it to work. So that was the only comment I wanted to make. I do not have any current legislation to discuss.
It looks like Mr. Third has a question for you, Ms. Littman.
Oh, yes, Mr. Therrett, I'm sorry.
Sorry. Is that it? Is that on?
Mr. Therrett, yes, I can hear you.
Okay. You hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. I know it's not specifically about the animal control. There was a question for hopefully the police or anybody else, maybe Mr. Bartos. Was there a law passed recently allowing fireworks in Ohio?
No.
Someone said no.
I don't believe that was one of the city officials.
Mr. Therrett,
Yes.
is that a discussion that you would like to have offline? We can certainly contact the police chief and see if how they are currently handling fireworks situations.
That'd be great. Yes, thank you.
Mr. Lewis,
Yes.
I also would like to piggyback on Linda. The information cards are here in council chambers for anyone that would like to come and get a supply.
Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. I would like a few for our northwest side over here. I'd like to have a few if I could.
Okay, I got them from the mayor's office. They were in my mailbox.
Okay.
I just wanted to make you all aware.
Thank you, Diane.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions regarding police and fire? Or my committee members, are there any comments or questions you might have? Seeing none, Mr. Lewis, I think we're good.
Thank you. Public utilities,
Public Utilities has nothing.
rules and courts,
I have nothing in rules and courts.
streets,
I have nothing in streets and highways.
all right, finance. That's me. So in the finance, we have, please prepare legislation to appropriate the unappropriated balance of the general fund, $120,000 into the accumulated sick. And this appropriation is needed for retirees' final payout for the year end. Who do we have present to speak to this? I see that all phone callers have been muted, which has helped with feedback, but I wonder if the mayor and safety service director have been muted in that same case. Okay.
I thought Lori was on.
I think they're all muted, and I don't know which one of the phone callers is them. Kathy just texted me. She said we have muted them, so they can't speak to us now. So I guess we just have to unmute everyone now for them to be able to speak.
Well, let's see.
Mr. Lewis, I believe if somebody is on the phone, they can hit star 2 times and unmute themselves.
And so I was thinking that there was a way. So I guess, Mayor, if you can try to hit star twice and see if it unmutes you. Okay, everyone
Yeah,
seems.
this is Debbie Bonk. Can you hear me?
Yes, we have Debbie Bonk. We can hear you.
Okay, well, I can talk to this. Is for the appropriation for the accumulated sick account. There were 3 retirees that were not in the budget. So the account, of course, was short due to the payouts. And in looking at all the transfers, the only way we could find to do it right now was an appropriation.
Okay. Are there any questions from committee members or other members of the council? Ms. Littman?
Yes, I just have a question regarding our policy for accumulated sick time. $120,000 for 3 retirees seems exorbitant. So I'm wondering what is our policy that we allow this much sick time to be accumulated?
Right.
Can you respond to that, Debbie?
Yeah, this sick time is for 4 to 5 employees. So the sick policy is doing it from memory. They get up to, I think, 1,100 hours at 100%, and anything over that is at 40%. And then they get their vacation time payout if they haven't used it. So whatever accumulated sick they have received, their payouts could be.
So they essentially get 6 months sick at 100%.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that, Ed.
1,100 hours, they
Yeah.
essentially get 6 months sick time and then 40% after that, and then whatever vacation.
Correct. That sounds about right.
So is this a policy that is for contracted employees, or are these retirees the general city employment personnel?
This is for, this policy is in the union contracts for police and fire and our AFSCME union members, and then also the handbook for the employees that are non-union contracts.
Any other questions? All right, I see it has emergency language, which I will give my verbal to, and I will also give my verbal to have it on the agenda. Anyone else from the committee?
Megan Starrett, verbal.
Verbal from Mike Gregg.
Thank you.
Next piece we have is please prepare an ordinance to appropriate the amount of $65,000 from the unappropriated balance of the 1420 fund to the following account: Millennium Boulevard Extension. The $65,000 is an ODOT reimbursement grant for Geist Construction as part of the Shears Warehouse project for construction of Phoenix Avenue. I do remember us going into, I think this might have been 2 years ago that we first approved this project. But is there any questions or discussion this evening regarding it? With that said, I would give my verbal. Anyone else from council?
Megan Starrett, verbal.
Verbal from Mike Gregg.
Thank you.
Do we have Dave Maley able to speak yet?
Yes, I'm on the line if you can hear me.
Yes, we can. Okay, this one's going to be all you. Please,
Appreciate that.
legislation to appropriate from the unappropriated balance of the general fund to the following accounts: $160,764.74 to real property tax, hospital real estate; $75,000 utilities, hospital; $10,000 services and contracts, hospital, for a total of $245,764.74. Go ahead, Mr. Mann.
Okay, this legislation is there's three pieces. Obviously, the first one is the $160,764. And what this is, when we did the board of revision settlement with quorum and with the school boards, we received a payment of $431,464.20. At that time, based on my conversations with the auditor, and I guess there was some miscommunications, but that payment I thought was the payment for the city. A couple weeks ago, I got a call from quorum asking about the settlement payment, and after some investigation, both with quorum and with the auditor, I was told that they should have received part of that $431,000 payment because they did pay property tax up until May 16th of 18, so they did pay a majority of the first half. So the $160,000 and $167.64 is their share of the payment. We should have received $270,696.46 for that settlement payment. And the Board of Revision values, just so to refresh your memory, is the original value was $26,319,000, and the revision value was $6,587,000. Just to piggyback on that, when I was speaking to the chairman, Mr. Lewis, about this issue, I just would like to bring to your attention another issue with regards to taxes. We received a letter from the State Board of Taxation on May 27th with regards to our filing for an exemption for the hospital for 2019. We could only file for an exemption for 2019 because you have to own the property at the first of the year when you file. So we did not own it in the first year of 18, but we did in 19. And we did receive the exemption from the state on May 27th in a letter we received. There is a 60-day period that allows for an appeal. So I'm not sure at this point in time. I've done some checking, but I'm still not sure if the school boards will file an appeal or not. So it's almost about 1 more month, 30 more days, I guess, at this point. If that does not happen, once the 60 days goes by, the auditor will put the exemption on and we will get a credit for those taxes that we have paid, which I think we're in the process of paying second half right now. And that'll be for about $150,269 for 2019 taxes. And it also will be beneficial because we still are paying, we would be paying taxes this year too for 2020. So just wanted to bring that to your attention. Now, if they do appeal, if we do get an appeal, and it would most likely come from the school boards, then things will probably, based on my conversations with the auditor's office, it could be a while before this thing gets straightened up because they said it usually takes about a year on the appeal. So we're hoping that that does not happen at this point in time so we can get this clarified. The second line talks about the $75,000 for utilities for the hospital. As you know, when we last went to council for utilities and services and contracts, we thought we'd have enough to cover till the end of April. So we're much beyond the end of April at this point. We still have a few dollars left in both those funds. We're asking for $75,000 for utilities and $10,000 for services and contracts. We're not positive based on, we can't foresee into the future, but we would hope that this amount should take care of hopefully almost up till the end of the year.
Okay, and I just want to reaffirm or reconfirm what you had stated. That 160,000.
Yes.
We are legally obligated to pay that, correct?
Yes, I believe so. We did check. I did follow up with our legal counsel for the hospital and did check with him on this, and he said we are obligated to pay it. And they also are in bankruptcy, so I had questioned that too. But from my understanding, that we are obligated to pay it.
But in failure to pay that could possibly take the city into a position of litigation that quorum would bring against us for not paying them what is owed to them. Correct?
I would anticipate that's probably what they would do. They never threatened. They've been very cordial through my conversations with them. But what I got from the auditor's office was basically they really didn't know how to split it up into two checks, so they just paid us. Unfortunately, they didn't really let us know that part of that check was theirs.
Yeah. Well, it's still preferred that they pay us and then we pay quorum than us instead of us having to chase them.
I read an article in Wall Street Journal that for the graduates right now, they are recommending graduates from college to seek out referrals. And 80% of the jobs that they predict, 80% of the jobs that are available on that will come from.
Whoever's talking about jobs, can you mute your mic?
All that. They said to send out 200 resumes. But if you know that referral, get you there.
I repeat to all members in attendance, please do not speak while you are on attendance to this. We are recording this. This is an official record of the city of Massillon. With that said, Ms. Creamer, do you have a question?
I do. Can Mr. Mailey expand on the service and contract line of $10,000? What specifically is that for?
I would ask that if Lori Boron's on the line, she could explain that more thoroughly than me.
Because the company he works for now has
can you hear me?
Yes.
I didn't send him letters, so I'm glad. But,
this is Lori. Can you hear me?
Just a second, Lori.
Okay.
Again, if you're on the phone call, please cease all conversations you are having. We are not able to hear the city officials when they are presenting to us on this topic. Ms. Boron, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Service and contracts, just some of the things that is involved in that is our landscaping that we have that goes out. So we have the landscaping come that makes sure that we keep the facility in a good, appearance to everybody. We do have still an obligation to keep one elevator or the elevators where they need to be. So it does encompass some of that. In the past, it has also done some things with our security piece, but we have been able to trim that back. We've also needed to use such companies as Kimball to do some recycling and disposal of trash for us. So those are just a few of the things that we use on the services and contracts piece.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or discussion?
Mr. Lewis?
Yes, Ms. Littman?
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure what that 60-day appeal timeline was. Is that 60 days from the 5/27 letter date, or when will that 60-day period cease?
I'm sorry, Ms. Littman, it's the 5/27 date.
Okay, 60 days from 5/27.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Lewis?
Mr. Hernkang?
Thank you. Back in February, when council approved ordinance 18/2020, it had hospital services contracts and hospital utilities on it, like the second and third items here, but the property taxes were separate. And honestly, in my head, I consider the utilities and the service and contract separate from what we're required to pay quorum as a part of the settlement. Shouldn't these be separated and that be removed, and utilities and services and contracts be on one piece, and the real property payment or reimbursement, whatever you want to call it, to quorum be on a second one?
That would be at the discretion of the committee. I see your point. My personal opinion is I'm just as happy to leave it together. Do other committee members have an opinion of wanting to divide the two?
Mr. Lewis, Dave Mealy, I can tell you when I put this legislation together that it was at the suggestion of Ms. Bonk in the auditor's office that I put all of it together.
Ms. Starrett or Mr. Gregg, do you have anything that you'd like to weigh in on?
No, Mr. Lewis, I think it's fine together.
Mr. Lewis, I have no problem with it being together, especially if that's what was recommended by the other officials.
Any other questions or discussion? All right, well, I give my verbal to have it placed on the agenda for Monday.
Megan Starrett, verbal.
Verbal from Mike Gregg.
All right, the next piece we have is please prepare legislation to make certain transfers within the, I have to zoom in, I couldn't quite see what it said, within the 2020 appropriations from within the general fund for the year ending 12/31/2020. It is real property tax of $3,000 to go to hospital, eye, and dental. And it is the transfer out. This is to pay for medical benefit expenses for Civil Services Commission employee. Would this be the auditor's office or the administration that would want to speak to this?
Ed, this is Lori. I can speak to this. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, all righty. This is to give the Civil Service Commission the, how do I say this? Hospitalization. She has been working over 30 hours because of COVID. It has caused a lot of work for Jody. She is averaging over the 30-hour threshold, and anything over 30 hours, you are required to offer hospitalization. So this is due to COVID and the hours that our civil service employee is working at this time. So we needed to bring her up and make that all good for her.
Well, that's brings on a plethora of questions. First off, per her job description and her place within the job chart, is it a part-time or a full-time position?
It's considered permanent part-time.
And are we still operating her at part-time when she exceeds the 30 hours and requires benefits?
Yes, anything over the 30 hours requires that you pay the benefits.
But are they still considered part-time? I mean, what my concern is she's still within the parameters of her job description as we set up in our hierarchy.
Yes, she is. It's considered permanent part-time.
Okay. I guess I'll be a little bit more clear. When I think of a part-time employee, I'm thinking of someone that works below a certain amount of hours. You're telling me that they have exceeded a number of hours that now brings them into a different class. Is that violating the current job placement within our city that we have all that city council has already voted to accept? For example, if we have someone as part-time and we agree as part-time and then you start working them full-time, that violates, and I can't, someone help me out with the word. I keep saying hierarchy. That's not the word I'm looking for. But on the chart, you know what I'm talking, classification, the job classification. Does that make sense? Basically, are we in violation of the job classification by working them in excess of 30 some hours?
Mr. Lewis, this is Barb Sylvester. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you. I can probably help you to answer that. And yeah, she still is within the same qualifications that she has been before. So she is just at the point now where she's working 30 hours per week. So again, by federal law, and those are records that the auditor's office keeps track of, number of records, that we do have to offer that to her at that point. But yes, through our job descriptions and classifications, she still is under the exact same classification. There was no change there. It's a formula that the auditor's office does every 6 months according to the number of hours that a person works. And because we don't have a civil service department and a human resource, she's still doing the part of that as well.
What tasks are she completing that is taking so many hours?
Well, basically, we've had quite a few hires. We've had to have 3 firefighters hired. She's had to create all of the testing for that. We have 2 open positions in our street department that she's also having to hire. She's putting together the testing for those. She's also she's taken on the task of online applications, something we didn't have in the past. People would have to come in and bring in applications. She's putting all of that together. She is revising and updating our handbook that hasn't been done since 2015.
Which handbook is that?
There are a number of projects as well as FMLA. And we do have to follow the additional guidelines through COVID-19 for FMLA as well.
So it's not all COVID then?
Not all of it isn't, no.
You've mentioned online applications and a handbook that are neither one of them are COVID.
No, it's not, but there's an unemployment piece of it that's in there though, for persons who were unemployed during the COVID-19 stay-at-home order.
I will say that if anybody has paid attention to my opinion when it comes to certain things on personnel, I always get very suspicious and very leery whenever someone has an increase of pay, benefit, responsibility, classification, or anything that resembles that, because all too often what happens within government is what becomes a temporary part-time kind of thing all of a sudden becomes a permanent status. That's my concern. We approve this financial benefit now, and next thing I know, I look at 2021 benefit and permanent part-time becomes full-time, and it's justified because we'll be told, well, council, you voted for it back in June, so obviously you're okay with it. And this is not an indictment on the mayor or Barb or the the safety service director or Lori, it's not an indictment on anyone. This is just my experience of how these things tend to roll out. That's why I'm very hesitant and inquisitive. Would the yes?
If there would be a change in the classification, that would have to come to council through the job descriptions and the classification. Yes.
I'm well aware of that, but Barb, I've been around long enough that the conversation will go like this in 6 months. We're going to change the job description and classification because, as you guys have already approved back in June, this is now a full-time position. You guys approved that through voting for their benefits, and then council usually goes along. I've seen it happen time and time again in the past decade. So, like I said, it's not an indictment on you. It's just the way things always work out. And why I'm suspicious of it. Is the $6,000, would that be legible or eligible, for reimbursement through that money that we're getting out of the state Senate through the audit? Since it's supposed to be COVID related, are we going to be able to cover that $6,000 with that money?
I guess, again, we don't have all the details on that portion of the money, and I would probably refer that question to the auditor and Debbie Bonk from the auditor's office.
All right, well, I'll give my verbal to put it on the agenda, but I'll probably only want to give it first reading right now. Yes, Debbie?
I was just going to say, I don't know about the employee salaries. From what I read briefly, it just stated that they would have to have been mitigating COVID-19 situations, meaning like health personnel, et cetera. So I would have to get more clarification on that.
All right, thank you. Well, like I said, I'll give my verbal to put on the agenda, but I'll probably only want to give this first reading so that we can get a better picture and everything. Do I have any other members of the committee?
I'll give my verbal, but I do see Jill has a question.
I'll get to her in a second. Mike, Greg?
Yeah, I'll give my verbal, but again, same as you, I've got some questions about it.
Ms. Creamer, I'm sorry. Did you have a question or a comment you wanted to make?
I had a question, but I'll wait for your committee to ask the questions before I ask mine.
They're given clear.
For the safety service director, she stated the responsibilities of this employee. How has those responsibilities changed when she was hired in? Because I look at this as this is part of her responsibility to work part-time and complete these tasks. How is it not being completed?
Well, these are job duties that I have given her since I've taken the role as safety service director. Some of you may recall in the past that was a contracted employee, and we did come through council then to get it set up as a permanent part-time employee. So again, at the point where this person is, whether she was, at some points in time, she was working 25, 26 hours, 28 to 30 hours now. It does run through the auditor's office, and we do have to follow the federal law once they meet that peak through the Health Care Insurance Act. We do have to offer that insurance to those persons when they're over those number of hours, and I'm sure Debbie Bonk can attest to that as well.
Ms. Creamer, did you have a follow-up? Did you have a follow-up question, Ms. Creamer?
Yes, and I just had another question. I work in the private sector, and I do have part-time employees. And there are times when my part-time employees do work.
Ms. Creamer, Ms. Sarah, can you please?
That's fine.
Please mute.
Shut up.
Can you mute Ms. Sarah? Okay, Ms. Creamer.
Yeah, I'm just questioning. I do have part-time employees, and there are times where they work additional hours, 30, 32, even 40 hours in a week. And, we don't pay them benefits for them working at full-time status because it is a temporary additional hour. So I guess I'm questioning how long has this employee been working over her set hours per week?
Well, as we stated at the beginning of the call, it has been more recent that she has had to be able to work more hours. And again, it goes by the number of persons we have to hire, the number of tests that we don't have a position for. And, you know, as far as being over the number of hours, if you want me to get with the auditor's office and send you the calculation that they do to see where we are at as a city to follow the federal guidelines to offer that, I can get that to you.
I guess I'm just a little, I'm just trying to grasp this. I understand the additional employees coming on, but are we expecting to have 3 to 4 additional employees every week for the remaining year? I mean, this is like a set time, if I'm understanding it correctly, that we have additional employees. Yes, she's doing the handbook, she's doing this policy, but that shouldn't take precedent. It should be getting these employees up and running, and then when it slows down, she can complete the other responsibilities and tasks. I'm just trying to understand how we're just going to throw her on insurance at this point.
Well, that's basically exactly what has happened. We have been trying to work those other projects in. But again, we had 3 positions we had to fill in the fire department. We now have 2 positions we have to fill in the street department. We had an employee that moved out of state and also an employee that passed away. So again, it's not additional positions by any means at the city. We also have positions that we have to replace at the wastewater department as well.
Mr. Lombardi.
I guess my question is, it goes along with Mr. Creamer's. If she's got so many additional duties, why aren't we looking at hiring a contract employee to come in and help her or do something to lessen her load? This just sounds to me like we're just moving her into a full-time position without any precedence whatsoever. You know, when in fact, you know, maybe some duties need to be put on a back burner while she handles more immediate concerns like hiring and everything. The handbook could probably be put on a back burner or even reassigned to another person in the department. I just think that, I know when I was in management, we had to watch our part-time employees' hours, and we made sure that they didn't go over an average number of hours. And if they did, we ended up having to cut them back in other areas to keep them from going into full-time. And I think this is just a mismanagement problem here that can be easily solved by just a little bit more insight into what she's doing.
Well, in response to that, again, I will say we have a civil service position. We do not have a human resource department division. And so that's part of what she's handling there. We do have personnel issues and matters on a regular basis, just as anyone does in private sector as well as in the city. We do have to handle and address those personnel issues. And so again, it is ongoing, and that's why a handbook that's over 5 years old with federal law changes and all requirements and guidelines we have to follow, it is definitely something that is necessary for us as in operations of this city.
With that said, we're going to have a lot of time to discuss this. I'd rather us just move on to transfers. With the transfers we have tonight, let me see here. Remember, we just have to give our verbals and then it takes into effect. We have one coming from civil service. It is reducing service and contracts by $5,223, supplies materials by $2,290.32, travel and seminar by $150, placing it into hospital eye and dental, PRS, Medicare salary. Diane, we cannot sign this one. So this will have to be represented to council in 2 weeks' time. The next one's for auditor. It's transfer out of $10,640 and placing it into IT services. This is to realign the budget to pay BPI information systems to provide an additional layer of backup protection services for the entire city for all services and software programs. This was not part of our 2019 budget and an expense that is needed due to increased vulnerabilities and fraud because of COVID-19 transfer pays. I go ahead and give my verbal for this one.
Megan Starrett, I'll also give my verbal.
Verbal from Mike Gregg.
Thank you.
And I'm actually going to backtrack, Diane. I'm sorry. This civil service one, which is essentially providing salary and benefits, does this go in line with the other one we were just discussing? Essentially, we are draining what is left in civil service accounts, didn't have enough money, and so we're having to tap into other accounts, and that's why one's being voted on, the other one is not. Can someone answer that?
Yes, I can go ahead and answer that. Yes, that's basically to cover for the same pieces of this that we were just speaking about earlier. Yes, and in working with the auditor's office.
So to be clear,
the auditor and Debbie Bach put this together.
Okay, well then to be clear, so typically when we get to transfers and we give our verbals and it takes effect, it's because it was already budgeted for the general department and it just has to be shifted from like supplies to benefits. When we have to vote on it, means it's coming from a different area altogether outside of what we really, what we originally budgeted. That's why it's coming out of real property tax and being switched over to civil service. That's why there's two different pieces here. I just want to be clear, which kind of is even stickier, but still, Diane, I just wanted to clear that up, and yeah, we will wait. Miss Littman? You're muted, Miss Littman.
I'm sorry. Just a quick question. Would we be able to segregate the portion of the job that is COVID related and apply for the reimbursement or the payment of those duties from the bill, what is it, 301 that we were talking about earlier? And then the balance of that, she may be able to remain within her permanent part-time status and stay with the part-time payout, not including the insurance and so forth payments. So I guess I would say we could maybe divide the duties that that person is currently undertaking, those of which would perhaps qualify for COVID-ID reimbursement, COVID-19 reimbursement, and the others stay within their permanent part-time job description. Is there something that we might be able to check into for our next discussion?
Yeah, I'd love to hear if there's any feedback. I mean, I'm sure they probably don't have the exact answer right now, Ms. Littman. But if we can have that particular situation, have an answer for that for our next conversation, that'd be great. So with those two transfers, the first transfer we had related to civil service, just make sure we have that at our next work session because we're going to discuss it. But the second one, we did give our verbals, the one related to the office.
Well, that was backwards, Ed. That was backwards. You gave me the verbals on the first one, but
no,
we're holding the second.
Okay, so I'll be, let me, we gave verbals for the one that is labeled auditor, in which we are transferring for IT purposes, correct?
Yeah, I got that one, the auditor, yes.
And then we did not give verbals for the one labeled civil service. That was a total of when they were transferring out of servicing contracts and placing it into benefit line items.
Correct. Gotcha.
And then, okay, I see what you're saying, but we did give verbals to take from property tax and transfer advance out and place into hospital identity, and that would go up for first reading on Monday.
Right.
Okay, all right, we're on the same page then.
Okay.
All right, with that said, that is the end of the Finance Committee. We come to the portion of the meeting where if a member of the community would like to speak, they will be able to. We will try to set some boundaries or guidelines to help make this go as smoothly as possible. If you'd like to speak, please state your name and your address for the record. Please limit your comments to only 3 minutes. We will remind you this is not a question and answer time. Please keep it to comments only, as we will not be able to answer any questions you present. Since we do not have a means to identify who would like to speak, I would ask that you state your name, and then I will recognize you. That way, if there's 2 people that try to speak at once, I can recognize one or the other, and we know who is going to be speaking. With that said, if you have any comments, please begin.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
My name is Randolph Lamp. We live at 1256 Lenox Avenue Northeast, Massillon. I am stating my opposition to the proposal of rezoning the church property once again. I do have a comment. At the request of some of my neighbors, I had a conversation with our city law director, Mr. Bartos, a few months ago concerning the rezoning of the church property. He was a very pleasant person to speak with, but said he really couldn't offer us residents any legal advice because he represents everyone in the city. But now I understand he is going to work directly with Progressive Auto Group on documentation preparation in support of this proposal, Progressive's proposal, without any representation by the most impacted people, which are us residents. That concerns me. I also wanted to comment briefly that I feel that these virtual meetings are unfair for us residents. I really see no urgency in this rezoning issue. I think it should be postponed until it can be done as it has been done in the past in chambers. And finally, some council members have met with one-on-one with Progressive Auto Group. I would like to ask them to take that same initiative and please meet with some of these residents that are across the street from the church or adjacent to the church and get a full understanding of their concerns about this rezoning issue. I think it would be beneficial to the council members, and it would certainly be beneficial to those residents. And I appreciate the time you've given us, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lamp, and I do recommend to reach out to the law director about your concerns on their representation and work within the legal documents.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak this evening?
I would.
Hello.
Oops.
Miss Jill S.
Okay, I am Jill Spriggs. I live at 1431 Springhaven Circle Northeast. Springhaven Circle adjacent to where the rezoning is proposed. And I would like to state that I am opposed to the rezoning just because there's enough commercial commercial enterprise going on right next to us in the way of Progressive and the drugstore and all those other things. I think that it would be changing the character of the neighborhood. And that's all. I just wanted to register my opposition.
Thank you. There was another gentleman that just tried to speak in.
Yes. Hello. Yeah. President Pro Tem, this is LJ DeLuca.
Yes.
2954 Veterans Boulevard, Southeast Massillon, Ohio. Ed, I want to thank you personally for putting this on. However, I wish we could get some better quality on this, Ed, so that we can make Massillon proud as far as these Cisco WebEx meetings. I've been in a lot of meetings, and the quality's pretty bad, especially for this type of important of a venue. Ed, so I'd appreciate if you could work on that. I want to talk tonight. Many people have talked to me downtown when I was eating today, some executives. I believe that Mayor Kathy Catazera-Perry wants to now take the money that we have acquired from the equipment from Affinity Medical Center and now continue on with this Affinity Medical Center paying all the bills. I listened in tonight quickly to get on here, and I'm against that. I think that I also against some of the comments the mayor made. Like, for instance, I think it was a meeting the 15th to 16th. She says, I just think it's extremely reckless to spend money at this point, the mayor said, Mayor Kathy. We have worked so hard to get in this position we're in. I'm not saying that we don't want to help them, meaning the business owners. We are helping them through federal dollars. No, wait a second. Back up. We need to help them for all the things they got, not only from her streetscape, but also from COVID-19. We're getting hit with double whammy, maybe 3 from the mayor and 1 from now the state for these businesses downtown. And it's about high time the mayor says that businesses got to sink or swim. It's about time that the mayor helps them swim. We need the money from the city of Massillon, and we also need the money that I talked to Samantha. I want to thank her, Samantha Walters, the city's director of community development. I've also talked to Mr. I want to thank him this time, and Mr. Ted Hurricane, and also Mel Hurricane. I've talked to these people. We need to do something to a fair shake of these businesses. In my opinion, Ed and all the council members, I feel that the mayor and her crew are neglecting the business owners in downtown Massillon, Ohio, and I'm not happy about it. Thank you, and I appreciate it.
Thank you. Anyone else that would like to speak this evening?
Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yes, my name is Michael Veron. I live at, my wife Jane and I live at 1760 Spring Haven Circle. We're directly adjacent to and abutting the St. John's Lutheran Church property that was considered for rezoning. I just wanted to express my my feelings that we are really, really against the rezoning. We live in a great neighborhood. I think anybody on city council would be happy to live in our neighborhood. It is quiet, it's peaceful, it's relatively crime-free. I just don't want it ruined by a more commercial development very, very close to my house with a lot with several hundred cars on it and lights and noise. And I want to keep it the way it is. And I thank you for letting me speak. I just wanted to let you know our feelings.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, with that said, our next meeting will be on next Monday. That is the
6th.
July 6th at 6:30. Everybody try to have a good rest of their evening, and we'll see you then. Thank you.
Ed. Ed Lewis.
I'm still here, but I don't think we can do any more business. We've ended it and people have
Well,
left.
boo to you.
I'm sorry.
It's Claudette.
Yeah, I'd be concerned that anything we do would be called into question.